I am Diego Cerrai. I am assistant professor at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of Connecticut. I'm also the associate director for the New England Thriving Community Technical Assistance Center, New England TCTAC, and also interim director for the Eversource Energy Center. Also with us, we have the director of the TCTAC Center, that is Carolyn Lin. The scope of the TCTAC is in 4 different pillars. So we are dealing with environmental quality, so air quality, water treatment, land use, waste management, and sustainability, energy, infrastructure resources, efficiency, EV, and broadband access, climate adaptation, risk assessment, project planning, policy analysis, environmental and social resilience, and environmental health, so air quality, asthma, lead, mercury, drinking water, transportation pollution, and other contaminants of concern. Today's webinar will be at the intersection between the energy sector and climate adaptation. The TCTAC offers several services, including grant preparation and submission, technical consultation, and training programs and tools. And you can see below like a list of the main services that we are offering. So this specific webinar is about the effects of storms and power on New England communities and pathways to grant application. So we'll talk about first how storms form, then power outages and how they affect our New England communities, and finally, like what opportunities do the communities have for grant application. This presentation was created by graduate assistant Zubair that is working in my team. So as I mentioned, like we will start talking about the New England weather scenarios, the types of storms and how storms form, storms and their impact on communities, power outages and their impact on communities, what mitigations effect have been done or can be done for storms and power outages, and finally, grant opportunities and applications. First, talking about New England weather, as we all know, it is unpredictable. So if you don't like it, just wait a little more and most likely it will change. And our weather here in New England is influenced by our latitude, proximity to the Atlantic Ocean, and a very diverse topography. We are in a very specific area that falls like where, like to the south of us, we have the ocean, so, and very often like it remains pretty warm even in the middle of the winter. And to the north of us, we have Canada, so very cold air. And so here, like these air masses from different origins meet and can create like severe storms, especially like in the winter months. So the climate of New England is humid continental, characterized by 4 different distinct seasons. And we experience these cold winters with significant snowfall and warm summers. March historically is the month that brings the biggest snowstorms, but as you've seen this year, for example, there have been no significant snowstorms, at least in South New England, in the month of March, while still there have been like in the north. So we have really a very high interannual and intra-annual variability. Beyond that, beyond whatever happens in winter, even in the summer, we have tropical cyclones or hurricanes, and 30 of them have hit directly New England since recording in 1851. The most recent ones, for example, are Hurricane Sandy and Irene in 2012 and 2011. One that happened a little earlier was Hurricane Bob in I think 1991, if I remember correctly, and then most recent Isaias that happened in 2020. So let's look at the storms and their impact on our communities. We will look into the main storms that we have, so severe thunderstorms, snowstorms, ice storms, and hurricanes. Talking about severe thunderstorms, we'll start a little with their formation. So we'll have these updrafts of warmer air that goes upper in the atmosphere, reaches elevation up to 40,000 feet. And then on the other side, you can see on the left, you have that you have the cold downdraft. And at the basically where at the intersection between the downdraft and the updraft, in the middle, you can have a gust front that can move even horizontally and be very damaging there. So you can have very strong gusts. Very often in the summer, we experience gusts up to 60 miles per hour in this region, and those can be very damaging. Then we have snow and ice storms. So for snow and ice storms, they form again, like we can have the nor'easters in this area, and they form because of this strong contrast in air masses. So you have this cold air coming from the north that meets the warmer and humid air that comes from the south, and they form these strong storms here. But if the temperature is not cold enough over the entire column, we can have sleet or freezing rain. And even this winter, we had like a very significant freezing rain event that hit New England, especially northwest Connecticut, central and western Massachusetts, and southern New Hampshire. And those are areas that are the most prone to ice storms. And the reason for that is also because of the topography, especially the western part of the Connecticut River Valley. So western Massachusetts and northwest Connecticut experience a high amount of freezing rain and ice storms. And beyond that, also New Hampshire. And New Hampshire experienced also the devastating ice storm of 1998 that extended also to Canada. So these are other threats that we have in this area. Among these, sleet is the one that produced the least damage because, again, snow, if it is wet, it can create accretion on power lines and put down a lot of power lines, and the same thing to freezing rain, but sleet doesn't produce that. So it is another type of precipitation that we can have that is more threatening for traveling, because again, if you have sleet on the ground, it is dangerous, but not much for negative effects in terms of power outages. And finally, we have rain and rainstorms. And the most scary one is the hurricane and tropical storms. So the hurricanes form most of them in the tropical areas, especially in the Atlantic Ocean, between Africa, like West Africa, and the southeastern coast of the United States. And some of them can move north. And as they move north, very often they undergo what is called extratropical transition. So they become hybrid storms between a pure tropical storm and a more traditional storm that we have at our latitudes. And the issue is that once they do that, they become very asymmetric. And so you can have very strong gusts on the right side of the hurricane, for example, what happens with Hurricane Isaias. And on the other side, you have very weaker gusts. So it is very important as hurricanes move towards our area in the days before hurricanes move to our area to know exactly where the landfall will be, because on the right of the landfall, you can have devastating impact. On the left of the landfall, you may have a very, very small impact because they become very asymmetric as moving towards us. And all these storms have a significant impact on the infrastructure of New England and on our communities. The types of impact go from flooding, power outages, wildfires due to dry lightning, or due to more in general fire weather, as we have had over the past fall, especially in October, it was one of the worst seasons for wildfires for the New England area, infrastructure damage, and traffic disturbance. So these severe storms are and can be life-threatening. People can lose access to health services, food services, and other emergency services like police assistance. Again, during the worst storms, also the emergency services are not guaranteed in the worst, like in the worst of the storm. So people will need to be prepared and communities will need to be prepared. Power outage is the chief reason for loss of access to important services, and generators have limited capacities. So again, you may have a generator, but if the phone lines are interrupted, you still won't be able to call for help. So again, you may have power, but not phone services or other internet services. Right now, like a lot is done through the internet and so on. And travel can become impossible due to inaccessible roads, either from tree blocking or flooding or other reasons. And daily life is thwarted by storms of any measure. So here I will be presenting like one of the worst storms that hit New England in the past 20 years. This storm is the 2011 tropical storm Irene. And the issue is that right after that, meaning like just 2 months after that, another severe snowstorm hit, and that was the October 2011 nor'easter, called also the Thanksgiving nor'easter because it happens on October 31st. So Irene hit the east coast of the US with tropical storm force wind in August 2011. And in Connecticut, the winds were up to 55 miles per hour. This is the sustained wind. And then we have higher gust. There were 800,000 customers without power. So more than 50% of the customers in Connecticut lost power. And approximately between 1 and 2% of the Connecticut trees were downed. So huge amount of trees and very severe impact on our environment. And right after that, 2 months later, there was the October 2011 nor'easter with 18 inches of snow, resulting again in more than 50% of the state without power. So the Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security estimated the cost of these two storms between $750 million and $1 billion just in Connecticut, despite these storms hit also other parts of the New England area. But after that, there was in Connecticut the two-storm panel and a lot of recommendation and a lot of lessons learned. So for emergency response plans, in advance of these storms between 2011 and then, 1 year later, actually, there was Sandy. So again, emergency response plan were revised again. But since then, there have been, now the emergency response plan are much more specific and they have been enhanced. And municipalities, especially the smaller communities, when these events happen, should look for regional support and multi-municipality planning. So we cannot just be alone and think about just our communities. In this case, there has to be a network. And that is one of the lessons learned in Connecticut from this. Statewide tree risk assessment and prioritization schedule is now regularly conducted because, again, we love our forest in New England, but at the same time, we know that trees are dangerous when we have storms because you can get down trees on the roads, on houses, and on power lines. And so a lot of houses are closed. So it is important to know like what is the risk from the different trees, type of trees, and locations. And then utilities move in the direction of implementing selecting undergrounding and strengthening assets beyond the requirements of the National Electric Safety Code, with a cost that is very often shared between ratepayers and shareholders. And electric utilities started also to adopt systems to provide timely, accurate information about power outage prediction and restoration projections, remedying problems that occurred during the two storms. Because one of the main issue that happened around 15 years ago when those two storms happened, the three storms actually, in the end, because Sandy, Irene, and the October nor'easter, was the lack of enough communication and lack of enough information about what was going on, and specifically about the restoration process. And now there have been a lot of advancement in that respect. On our side, what we are doing to help utilities, this is just one of the examples. We developed the outage prediction model here at UConn. It is operational for Connecticut, Eversource, Massachusetts, and Eversource, New Hampshire. We are also in touch with other utilities in the Northeast United States to potentially extend this model to other areas. But again, this goes in the direction of pre-storm information and storm preparedness, not just in terms of weather, because for weather, there are a lot of services that do weather, but also in quantitative impact of the storm. And this is an example of a storm, for example, that happened in 2018, where we have our prediction and our actual. So these forecasts are communicated to utilities that take the most appropriate actions in advance of storms. And then, so the goal of all this is to mitigate the effects. So power outage prediction information is disseminated in advance of storm, for now, not over the entire New England area, but to utilities that are working with us. Outage reporting during the storms, and power restoration after the storm. And we are also developing an outage restoration model for that to improve the restoration and basically speed up the restoration after the storms. But storms will happen and power outages will continue to happen. So you can find on the different utility websites, for example, this is the one from Eversource, but if you go to the Avangrid website, you can get something similar. If you go to National Grid's website, you see very similar hints and basically messages about what to do in advance of storms. So have your emergency kit, stock up on non-perishable food, charge cell phones. Again, that is very important, because if you need to ask for help, it is something that you need to have a charge phone. And there are safety checklists on the different utility websites. And then the challenges of having and operating generators safely. Make sure that car has gas, or I would say also has power in it, because right now with more electric vehicles, the other challenge is that right now, in advance of the most severe storms, gas can end at the gas stations. But the issue is that if you get power outage, think about that you may not be able to recharge the car if you have an electric vehicle. And the same thing for communities. And make a list of emergency phone numbers or program them in the cell phone. And during a storm, extra care to down power lines, because they can still be live power lines. Safety of generators and safety of natural gas. So again, a lot of information is being done, but more have to be done for the impacts of snowstorms, because still now, when there are severe storms that happen, especially in winter, there are a lot of people that can have life-threatening situations because they don't have enough heat in their house, because obviously the electricity is not present. So they are burning like grills or other things inside the house, and still now in 2025 get carbon monoxide poisoning that is life-threatening. So, and we have seen that around the country and also in different countries like in Canada, that this is still happening now when the most severe storms hit, especially in winter, and there are prolonged power outages that exceed 24 or 48 hours. For example, if there is a 1 week of power outages and the temperature outside is like 0 degrees Fahrenheit, people find any ways to get some heat, and very often it is very dangerous. And again, safety guidelines, you can see here after a storm, so there are still like safety guidelines. So when the power return, don't turn on all the appliances at the time, look at, again, down power lines and call for emergency if you still see down lines, and recognize signs of a gas leak, and be careful of flooding, because again, depending on which storm you have, for example, if you have a hurricane and there is coastal flooding is the number one cause of losses during hurricanes. So after talking about all the issues that we can have when we have storms, I would like to present about the opportunities that communities have to either strengthen preparedness or community response to these storms and be better prepared. So some federal grant opportunities are like the North American Commission for Environmental Cooperation. That is an EPA-initiated funding program for community-based group for preparing for climate impact. And if I remember correctly, this is for US, Canada, and Mexico. So it's for the entire North America. Then there is the North American Partnership for Environmental Community Action that supports local environmental projects, fostering long-term community partnership and priorities. And then there is the BRIC grant, Building Resilience Infrastructure and Communities, funds annual projects reducing risk from hazards and decreasing future federal disaster funding reliance. Other opportunities are Safeguarding Tomorrow revolving loan fund. So this is for low interest loans to local governments for hazard mitigation projects and reduce risks from natural disasters. The HMGP program from FEMA that supports proactive efforts to mitigate future natural disaster damage. And Emergency Operation Grant Center, competitive Department of Homeland Security, so DHS grants for constructing or renovating state, local, or tribal emergency operation centers to improve emergency management capabilities. There are also several state grant opportunities. Some of these can be one time if there is a disaster, and I will make an example here. Some others can be recurrent every year. So the Deep Climate Resilience Fund, this is specifically for Connecticut. It helps communities in Connecticut access federal funding to enhance climate resilience. And again, in the past, there have been like one-time funds after severe storms. For example, after Hurricane Sandy, there was the Hurricane Sandy Disaster Relief Assistance to support owners of historical properties in Connecticut damaged by Hurricane Sandy. Right now, another program that is right now present in Massachusetts is the Climate Leader Grant. It's a $60 million grant supporting Massachusetts communities designated as green communities. In other states, for example, in Vermont, we have the Vermont Climate Economy Initiative, led by the Vermont Council on Rural Development. It supports rural communities in developed climate resilience economies through local innovation, clean energy projects, and sustainable development strategies. In New Hampshire, Conservation District Climate Resilience Grant that provides funds to improve the resilience of New Hampshire farms in the face of extreme weather and climate change, supporting conservation practices that enhance soil health and water management. For New England, we have the New England Sea Grant Program that supports projects on healthy coastal ecosystems, sustainable fisheries, aquaculture, resilient coastal communities, and environmental literacy across New England states, including specific opportunities from Sea Grant in Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. And then we have the Long Island Sound Study grant program, grants for community impact, ecosystem restoration, research, and grant writing assistance to enhance environmental quality and resilience around Long Island Sound. Let's go back to federal. We have the SBIR program, so SBIR, STTR. This specific one is called Gradients, Grid Resilience and Advanced Distributed Energy Technologies. The SBIR and STTR are specifically targeted to small businesses to develop advanced grid resilience technologies and control solutions to enhance renewable energy integration and improve grid resilience. In this case, the submission deadline has passed, but there will be similar opportunities available in the future under the ARPA-E program from DOE. DOE has also other annual opportunities. One that is very notable right now is the Formula Grant for Grid Resilience. And you can see here how it works. So you have annual allocations determined based on formula outlined in the law. Then we have state and tribes and territories that apply for their allocation. Goes back to DOE that awards the allocation. Goes back basically to the recipients that are selected. They select projects to be implemented by eligible third parties. Needs to go back to DOE that reviews and approves the project selection. And finally, the project construction may start. So for the formula grant, you have Grid Resilience State and Tribe Formula Grant. These provide non-competitive formula funding to state, territories, and tribes to improve the resilience of their electric grid. And in Connecticut, for example, we have the Grid Resilience State Tribal Grant for Connecticut that comes from these federal grants from the DOE that support efficient and reliable integration of variable and distributed energy sources needed to meet the 100% zero carbon electric sector goal and avoid fossil fuel peaking generation. DIF will receive $60 million over 5 years. And in Rhode Island, for example, we have the same grant in July 2023. The Office of Energy Resources applied for this formula funding through DOE called Preventing Outages and Enhancing the Resilience of the Electric Grid. And that was under the bill. And you can see some references here where you can click about. These are references related to the first slides, while this slide deck is interactive. So you can see here that in each of them there is the link, and by clicking to that, you can go to the specific link for the program that is discussed. So I would like to thank you all for the attention, and if you have any questions, please let me know.